we're live. What's happening, everybody? Hope everybody's having a fantastic start to your week this last Tuesday of the first month of 2022. Oh, how the time flies. So in a previous video, I put together, basically it went something like this. When's a good time to get out of the car hobby? And I went through some things that, some advice pieces that might help you along the way. I know a lot of guys appreciated that. At least that's a lot of the feedback I got on that was positive. Now, in this live video, what's up, Kobe? First in. But what I wanted to talk about in this video is how much is too much? And it rides on the coattails of that video that I put together earlier. The reason why I'm putting this together is, well, how often is it that these guys start getting into modifying cars? Great thing. But what ends up happening is you start to go too far. Nobody ever tells you when to stop. And what I've tried to do over the course of the years that I've been yammering into this camera is to try to put together combinations that work. Working, though, can be a bit of a subjective statement. So take everything that I'm going to say here with a grain of salt, but I will have some subjective data coming your way, at least in terms of pounds per horsepower. Basically, what I've found to be the limit in terms of what you can get away with, both with traction, real drivability, and the like. So, when you start to look at this, all of the modern pony cars, it doesn't matter which one it is, a lot of them, most of them are going to fall within a pounds per horsepower range. And I'll work with horsepower to the rear wheels because it's a little bit easier to translate. But if you factor in a number of around 10 or 11 pounds per horsepower, that'll put you about where you need to be in terms of where these modern cars are falling. Easy one to work with is going to be a Challenger. Challenger's 392, by the way, is what we're going to start off with. So the NA guys. A Challenger is typically going to put down somewhere around 400-ish horsepower to the rear wheels. Challenger checks in at about, say, 4,400 pounds, 4,300 pounds. So you can about math that to about 10-ish pounds per horsepower. Good enough for about an 11-second car. Now, guys, y'all know just as well as I do, it is no fun trying to get a scat pack to hook on 245 tires. You could, by that criteria alone, say that that is too much power for most people to drive around with. And on street tires, I would probably be inclined to agree with you. A lot of guys find themselves getting in way over their head, even with the basic stock combinations. Now, that's not to say that everybody is going to buy one of these things and go careening into a ditch. That's not what I'm saying. It's just that for a lot of guys, coming from their old sedan that they had at one point and upgrading into something like a Scat Pack or a Mustang, for example, is a huge performance increase. And it's a performance increase that a lot of folks really don't understand. I'll put it to you in other terms. The 5.0 Mustang Fox body weighed about 3,700 pounds, give or take. And let's call it 3,600 pounds. With a driver. We're talking like a coupe here. Do you realize that those cars put down 180 horsepower to the rear wheels? Basically, that is a 20 pound per horsepower power to weight ratio. And that car would go basically mid 14s. You can back math anything you'll like into this, but that's kind of a good barometer. A Mustang or a Scat Pack, for example, again, will take that number of 20 and basically double it. In other words, making it that twice as small. In other words, you have twice as much power basically per pound if you want to look at it that way. You're going from a 14-second car to an 11-second car, at least a 12.0. And isn't it odd that it works out basically that to go from a 14-second car to like a 14.0 to a 12.0, you are in essence doubling the power. And it makes sense. When Foxy back there was making somewhere around 360, 380 horsepower to the rear wheels, it was a 12.0 car. So kind of makes sense. That 10-to-1 kind of works out well with that. But think of it more like this. That Fox body Mustang would absolutely hook up at the stock power level, but it never would at a higher power level on stock street style rubber. When you get into the 10-to-1 ratios, 10-to-1 again being 10-ish pounds per horsepower, you are going to be far better off with a drag radial. In fact, I would almost consider it to be mandatory at that point. Realistically, you cannot take advantage of the power that that car is going to put down at lower speeds, say 30, 40 miles an hour. You just can't watt that thing and expect it to hook up on factory tires. It's not going to work that way. You've got to have a better tire underneath that thing or it's never going to hook up. But that's the world we live in now. We have, in essence, doubled the power to weight ratio, or in this case, halved the weight to power ratio. It works the same both ways, but that's the world that we live in now. And it requires a much more sophisticated tire than what the older stuff would give you. Now then, where do you go from here? Now we're just talking about stock cars. What about with modifications? Well, I'll get to that in just a second. Let me check in with you guys, and we're going to start talking about modifications and what my experience has been. The faster you go, or in other words, the lower the pounds go per horsepower. You find this pretty interesting. Let me check in with you guys real quick. Cody's saying too much power is when it's not fun anymore. Very good point. And it can get unfun real quick. Delio's checking in saying, what up, B? Got the flex. I like it. Marco's saying that's why I bought a C7 Stingray, not the Z06. Good point with that. Fun car to drive. No question about that. One of my favorite cars to drive. Someone saying, hey, Professor B, I've got the horns. Michael Groves is in. Got the flexing on. So is Mr. A. Joseph. I like it. Ryan saying, sup? Rob saying, just want to have enough fun to have horsepower to have fun until I get gapped. Yeah, no kidding. Sovereign saying, I'd be content with a 345, but I'd rather have the 392. The reason being, some people claim that they wish they bought a 392. That being said, 345 has more room for modding potential. Well, here's the problem with that statement. It's got more room for modding potential because it comes so neutered from the factory. But believe me when I tell you that with a cam, headers, exhaust, intake porting, larger throttle bodies, and etc., you can basically rest assured that the 392 is still going to give you all that you can handle and quite a bit more, and that's stock. So if you're into hot rodding and you want to have something that you can play with long-term and basically tinker with and have bolt-ons give you meaningful improvements, 5.7, very fun combination, very fun one to go with, no doubt about it. Michael's checking in with Sovereign. Sovereign saying, personally, I'd rather have the 392 and be content. I know for me that naturally aspirated power is way more than enough. No power mods needed. Donald saying, when it won't hook up and drive. True that. And Rick saying, hey. So here's the thing. We've established that even with stock cars, you practically nowadays need to run the thing on a drag radial. But what happens when you start to modify these things? And I don't mean like with exhaust, and I don't mean like with small modifications. I'm talking about real heavy-duty modifications. Well, let's drag this thing back a little bit. When you look at a regular old garden variety Hellcat, I think it comes in at like 7 and change pounds per horsepower. That's pretty creepy. I mean, you start looking at 600-ish horsepower to the rear wheels divided by 4,400, 4,500, depending on the weight of the vehicle. it starts to get enlightening at that power to weight ratio. At around the 7 to 8 pounds per horsepower range, you are now in a range where you really have no traction at low speeds. Rolling into the throttle quickly, even with the neutered gearing that a Hellcat has, rolling into the throttle quickly in any gear, say first or second gear, is going to translate into instant wheel spin, probably even with drag radials. Add a 309 gear or something like that, and it's going to get a whole lot different for you. In terms of excitement, I should put it a little bit more different there, because it's going to depend on the speed that you're going. The more power that you make, the higher the speed is going to be, where traction is now limited. So I can tell you from experience that with stock tires with a Hellcat with 309 gears, matting the throttle at 40 miles an hour is practically pointless. Well, imagine having something making even more power than that. A walking around number for street guys is, honest to goodness, going to chime in somewhere around, and this is at the number where cars are considered to be significantly fast. If you are somewhere around 6 to 6.5 pounds per horsepower, that's about where Chandelier is right now. Chandelier in really good air is scaring the hell out of a 10.0 at well over 130 miles an hour. That is about the time where, if you don't have drag radials, the car is actually, you could consider it to be dangerous. And depending on your setup, depending on the car itself, at about that 6 to 6.5 pounds per horsepower, it can get spooky if you're not on drag radials at significantly higher speeds. We're talking 65, 75, 80 miles an hour. Depending on how the car is geared, you go wide open throttle going down the freeway, there's a chance you're going to break the tires loose. And it's adorable when a car likes to get a little bit squirrely and likes to shimmy a little bit at 30 or 40 miles an hour. That's actually kind of fun. And it's actually very controllable, provided you've got enough practice and seat time. Things are completely different, though, when you're going 65, 75, 80 miles an hour, go to wide open throttle, and the thing starts to wall hunt. You have to understand that when you're going that fast, when you break the tires loose, everything is happening faster. The way that the car reacts is more violent per the amount of input. Raise the stakes. Let's go past where Chandelier is. Let's start to take a look at where Excessive was, which is Racer X's Charger. In that case, you're looking at around 5.5-ish, to 5.5-ish pounds per horsepower. We've really brought the number down quite a bit now in terms of poundage. That car would haze the tires with drag radials, mind you. That car would haze the tires at 110 miles an hour. Going 110 miles an hour, watt the throttle, the car downshifts, and it was trying to light the tires up. And it would actually shimmy until you got your foot out of it. And that's in essence what 1,000 horsepower to the crank, or about 830 or so horsepower to the rear wheels, will get you in a car that weighs, well, full weight, around 4,600 pounds. I understand there's guys that have more horsepower per pound than that, and they seem to live just fine on the street. But I'm going to challenge you to find any one of the owners of those cars that actually considers that car to be, what's the word? Fun anymore. Because it's actually more frightening than anything else. And by the way, anybody who's worth their salt that's done any real amount of hooning on the street, or just playing around with their car, or has driven one of these higher horsepower monsters, will tell you that when you watt the throttle going 65, 75 miles an hour just to simply get around somebody, or you roll into the throttle fairly hard, not even go to wide open throttle, and you start to get the thing into a little bit of wheel spin, that's a big problem on the street. It's one of the reasons why a lot of guys end up getting rid of their cars. And I get it. Again, it's going to depend on the car, and it's also going to heavily depend on the tire that you're running. But let me remind you guys of something. At some point, if that car is going to the drag strip, anything more than about 5 pounds per horsepower is going to start looking a lot like, in terms of ET, elapsed time in the quarter mile, that's going to be about a 920-ish, 19-ish pass at about 150 odd miles an hour. So let me tell you what happens at those speeds. When you are collecting real estate at that rate on the big end of the track, first of all, the rules mandate that you have to have a parachute. You're also probably going to be required to have some type of a roll cage. The minute you start needing roll cages is about the time you might want to start reconsidering what you've done with your car for the purposes of being a street car. Because I can tell you that a two-wheel drive, and again, we're talking two-wheel drive cars here, guys. We're not talking about GTRs, Lambos, all-wheel drive stuff. I'm not talking about EVs. I'm strictly talking about pony cars, front engine, rear drive. We're talking about vets, front engine, rear drive rigs. When you get into these power levels, traction, tire technology is what is keeping you alive, presumably, when you make hits like what I'm describing on the street. When you want the throttle at 65 miles an hour and the car wants to kind of drift a little bit, that's one thing. But when you hit fourth gear and the car is drifting, you're doing well into 100 miles an hour, 65 to 130, you're going to pull gear at about 110 in a manual transmission car like a Vet, and you're going to run fourth out to about 130 to 150 odd miles an hour, depending on how you like to race and what the guys around you are going to agree to. What we used to do typically would be 65 to 150, 65 to just basically whenever you ran out of gear in fourth gear. Some guys would go into fifth, but that was on their discretion, and they would carry those numbers out to 170, 180, 190, or whatever the car would run. Vipers would typically trap real high numbers in fifth gear, by the way. So what does all this mean? Well, the reality is that, again, the tire is what is keeping you alive at this point. And that is notwithstanding the idea that there is other stuff on the street, which could be anything: dust, dew, debris. The 3 big D's, that's the things that can kill you in a heartbeat. So when I'm saying what is too much, from my perspective, what I've lived with is if you've got a build in mind and you're going, man, I'm going to build this thing and it's going to be 1,000 wheel horsepower. There's a lot more that comes with that 1,000 wheel horsepower than just some kind of a street cred or clout. Again, most of the guys that I know that have built cars that are in the 950 range, 940 range, 930 range, they get sick of them pretty quickly. Number one, they are, without running like a DBR, ET Street, or something along those lines on the street, they're not going to hook up under normal driving practices. In other words, tipping into the throttle, trying to get around somebody, rolling into the throttle to change lanes. You're going from 30 horsepower to 400 horsepower like that. Things can get a little bit weird, especially given the fact that you can't drive the car like a normal car. So a lot of guys get annoyed by that. They get spooked by the power. Almost every single one of them. Hold, please. I don't know who puts that kind of horn on their car, but anyway. God, are they pulling into my parking lot? Okay. It's a live show, man. What can I say? So, but what mostly happens is guys get spooked by them. And it's at or around that 5.5-ish pounds per horsepower that is the twilight zone. And that's really kind of more to the point that I'm making here. The thing is that car at cruise, especially with the Hellcats, because you don't really need anything to get them there other than a couple of pulleys and a fuel swap. The thing is it'll lull you into a false sense of security, a false sense of safety, because they are so calm until you roll into the throttle hard. Then all hell breaks loose and you start lighting the tires up at practically any speed that you want to. It's a neat parlor trick, but the issue really comes when it happens and you didn't want it to happen. When at partial throttle, it lights the tires up. You're switching lanes, you go over some box dots, next thing you know, the car gets squirrely for seemingly no reason. You're running the thing on drag radials, there's no reason for it to be acting squirrely, but yet here we are. So that is the twilight zone number. Yes, you can build them and have them faster. You may have a cage in it. We're going to get to that here in a minute. If you're running the thing at the drag strip, laundry, what have you. But the reality is that most guys get spooked around that 5.5 horsepower, or I'm sorry, 5.5 pounds per horsepower range, and they never forget it. They never come out of being spooked by that car. And that's usually when the car gets sold and the guy, if he's still into cars or what have you, buys an old Bronco, buys an old Jeep, buys an old FJ40, buys an old something four-wheel drive that is a inline six or a V8, small V8 powered contraption that looks super cool that they can take to the beach, and they never think about going fast again. I can tell you this, from my own personal experience, I've had combinations, whether it's been Mopar with the Vipers, the Vets, the Mustangs, all of the stuff that I've ever owned. I've had stuff get crazy on the highway. I've had stuff wall hunt at 65. Okay, well, I've got enough practice with doing closed course stuff and autocross. Car getting nutty at 65 doesn't affect me at all. 100 miles an hour on that 3/4 shift. Yeah, it's a little bit spooky, but typically you can rein that in if you've got enough experience behind you. That's kind of a key point here. But at 130, 140 miles an hour, you just don't want the thing coming unglued. That's when it's not fun. And believe me when I tell you, at those speeds, you're not trying to get the car to do that. I've only done that a couple of times. One of them was at the request of Racer X, my buddy old pal. But basically, we're just doing what you would consider to be stability testing. Ruined my mile per gallon on that. Anyway, that car would literally smoke the tires from a roll at 100 miles an hour until you got out of the throttle, basically. This is real dangerous stuff. And again, it's at those power levels where you can't even impress your friends. That's the part I'm really getting to. Because it's at that twilight zone level that sometimes they hook, sometimes they don't. Sometimes they'll spin on the 4 or 5 shift with drag radials on the street. Sometimes they don't. These are the questions you don't want to have to answer when you are in the process of exercising the limits of your skill set to try to recover a car that is now gone ballistic as opposed to guided. These are the things that you just don't want to have happen. So, main thing I want to convey to you guys is, yes, there is a point where you might want to get out of the car hobby, but if you're going to stay in it, you're going to modify something, you're going to build something that is going to be, what's the word? Fun. If it's going to be fun, it's going to be safe, it's going to be entertaining for the long haul. And what nobody likes talking about is not going to be breaking parts every 4th or 8th time you drive them. See, the thing is that you can get away with a lot with some of these modern cars. In fact, you can get them into that at least 6 pounds per horsepower range without doing too much to the cars. But once you start moving past that, drive shafts, half shafts, other transmission, for example, in some cases, is going to start to become the weak link. Now you have become Sherlock Holmes in terms of trying to sleuth out what your weak link is going to be. What part are you going to break? Or what part is going to break next? The big issue, again, is modern cars, once you start getting around that 5.5 pounds per horsepower range, you are exceeding significantly the engineered parameters of what the parts that were put on your car originally were designed to deal with. The stresses are far and away greater. Again, think about it. We're talking about, in essence, if let's say we're talking about a Scat Pack, and you go from 400 horsepower to the rear wheels to 800 horsepower to the rear wheels. There's, with a supercharger and a built block and whatever, you know that your transmission isn't going to handle that. You know that your axles are probably going to be the weak link. But a lot of guys will still keep their stock stuff and just say, when it blows up, I'll replace it. I'll build it. Really? So that's a story for a whole other thing. Point is, when you are doubling the stresses, you're going to get double the failure rate, or probably higher. You go a little bit more than that, and you're going to get an even higher failure rate. And it's not like fail immediately. In other words, it's not like if you put more boost into your Hellcat or put that cam into your Scat Pack that everything is just going to fall apart and break right away. Doesn't work like that. A lot of times it's cumulative stress. Half shafts don't just break the first time you hit them hard, but they might break the 150th time you hit them hard. You get the idea. So at what cost does it take to get that power number? Well, you've got everything that it takes to get to the car, to that power number, because every combination is different, every platform is different. But if you're going to start going that route, may I suggest that you build the vehicle from the back to the front and from the ground up. Get the right tire, get the right parts underneath it so you're not dealing with breakage. But the main thing is to develop a skill set. Sign up for SCCA. Get the car on autocross tracks. If nothing else, it'll teach you some valuable lessons in terms of vehicle control. And I miss doing autocross. In fact, I miss doing autocross primarily with my Lightning. I had a Lightning that I used to autocross regularly, and I was really there to put on a show. I put the thing in second gear and it would just smoke tires, kind of drifted around the course. I kind of miss that. But just doing that alone taught me a lot of valuable lessons in terms of vehicle control. Don't be so narcissistic to think that whatever skill set you think you have will get you out of whatever kind of trouble you don't know that you may find yourself in. It can be a whole lot worse and happen a whole lot faster, these wall hunting extravaganzas that you can find yourself on once you've put all this power into your car. It can get a whole lot bad, a whole lot more worse than you think, and it can be really bad really fast. You're going to be relying on instinct and reaction at that point, and training if you have any. It saved me a bunch of times. Enough times where I started kind of doing it on purpose. Anyway, story for another day. Sorry, Mom. Anyway, the reality behind all of this, though, is that you are going to hit limits. And those limits can end up being hard limits, and they can be hard to deal with. And again, that's why once you hit that twilight zone of about 5.5 pounds per horsepower, that's where you see guys getting rid of their cars. But anyway, let me check in with you guys here. Rick's in saying, hey, B, what's up, man? Challenger 50 saying 392 is enough for having fun. Stoplight to stoplight. If you're going to the drag strip every weekend, get a Hellcat. I went to the drag strip every weekend with a SRT. Rick's saying, dude, I don't know what happened, but yesterday I bought YouTube Premium. Now I can contact you. Nice. Sean saying, good evening, Mr. Mason and friends. What's up? Delio saying, when you're out of money, that happens really fast. Rick's saying, got you on the 65 inch. I like it. Looking at you. Oh, Sovereign saying, your Hellcat's no joke. Yeah, she runs good. There's some pictures of her from Mopar Mageddon back there. Just about pulling that tire off the ground right there. Little stock boost getting after it. Michael's asking if I saw Demonology's video on the direct connection catalog. Not yet. I've put out a couple of myself on that. So, yeah, I think we're both on the same page with that. G-Man saying, I have a 2014 Challenger SRT8 and was thinking of installing a Legmaker cold air intake. I have a Diablo tune and pedal commander installed. That's pretty much it. Do you think the Legmaker is worth it? If you like the look of the Legmaker, yeah. So I did a video on the Legmaker, the true cold air Legmaker. It was one of the first videos, probably like 4 or 5 years old at this point. I did track testing with it. And I mean, in terms of power production or track results, if I remember correctly, it was maybe better. It was really hard to quantify, cutting the car a little bit to put that thing in there. If you were to just put a regular Legmaker in the car, it looks good, but you're not going to get a whole lot of power with it. The best combination for the NA guys is the Hellcat airbox with the Hellcat filter or a K&N filter with the snorkel. Just don't forget to put your window foam around the headlight hole so that the sleeve or that the snorkel fits over that a little bit more snugly. Oh, Sovereign saying, yeah, I did a great job covering that by Demonology. Cool. Oh, Sovereign saying, it's crazy you can now practically build your own drag pack from the ground up. You can. That's kind of crazy. Speaking of which, not drag packs, but I know that our local power broker has one jailbreak allocation left. That's Helfman Dodge. Michael's saying for about 35 grand, I could have more than a Demon and still be at the price of a Hellcat. Yeah, absolutely you can. Sovereign saying popos, exactly. Sovereign saying light on the pedal commander equals Bruce Banner, medium heavy on the middle. Incredible Hulk. I like the light on the pedal deal. That's funny. It's true though. Listen, and that's one of the things that a lot of guys don't really understand is that it actually kind of does pay. If you start building a lot of power, you might want to put a pedal commander on the car just to chill it out a little bit. Or, you know, find yourself in a situation where you can practice some vehicle control with the modified car. Makes a big difference in terms of potentially, you know, keeping you out of a scary situation. Sorry, saying now on this episode of Will It Hook. So true. And that's okay. So will it hook but at what speed? Yes. But at what speed will it hook? When I did the review of the Nitto Tri-5 R's, R2, the latest one, whatever I've got on those rims right now. One of the more interesting things that I noticed about those tires is, would they hook at 40? No. Would they hook at 50? Kinda. Would they hook at 60? Yeah. They'd haze a little bit. And that's with my car, full weight, probably half a tank of gas. They would still hook, but the difference is that my car is at 6.6 or something like that horsepower per pound. How much of a difference removing a pound from that 6.6 and making it 5.5, for example, pounds per horsepower? How much faster the car is. It's a significant difference. And in that case, it would be, will it hook it 75 or 80 miles an hour? It's going to depend on how the downshift plays into this. Is it a hard downshift, or is it a downshift where you hit it and it's a little bit of a doldrum? A lot of this is gearing related, and it's not to say that a 262 is better at a certain speed. You could have a 262, and in some cases it hits more violently at certain speeds than a 309 just because of how the downshift works. So yeah, start throwing more power at it, then you really start to mess with the will it hook deal. So yeah, I get it for sure. Crow saying amen. Scarelock saying, get information, Mr. B. What causes people to build a car like you're talking about? I can understand if they're going to compete for money, but just want it that way. Never could understand. SRT's answering that. Everybody wants 1,000 horsepower car until they have a 1,000 horsepower car. And the other side of that is everybody wants 1,000 horsepower until it's time to do 1,000 horsepower shit, right? So why ego? Because they want to have the fastest version of whatever, even though at this stage of the game, there's so many of these 1,000 horsepower flywheel cars, 800 plus horsepower to the rear wheel cars that they're everywhere. They all start to look alike, honestly. But a lot of it has to do with they just want more. They get to a certain point, they get used to it, and they want to feel that same hit. It's like, why is it that you got to dose up after a certain amount of time? Like a cup of coffee is, to some people gives them the jitters, and other people, drinking a whole pot of coffee just basically gets them through the morning. It's the same thing. You get used to it after a while. And so you want to go more and more and more. And what ends up happening is you get more to the point where something happens. You just aren't having fun anymore. The car is braking too much. The car is sketchy on the street. You just can't enjoy the car as an automobile anymore. Which brings me to my next point. When is it just really no longer a car? So I want you to kind of think about this in a little bit different way. If you have a car that's got a full cage in it, it's got the halo, basically on the inside of the car, it looks like Stuntman Mike's car. Is that still a car, really? Like, you ain't taking people for rides in this thing, realistically, right? Well, when you look at it from the point of view of Drag Week, all right? So Drag Week, if you're not familiar with what that is, it's, I think Hot Rod Magazine puts it on. And basically, it's a thing where you have to get in your car and drive to different drag strips around a certain area. And to put it to you like this, the fastest of the fast cars in that class are all running sixes in the quarter mile. Not uncommon to see a host of 7-second cars in this unlimited class. Technically, and we're talking technically, like as technically as you can get. Like any more BS and you're going to pop the freaking vat of this thing wide open. But technically they are street cars. But these are street cars that have first of all, they're certainly back half, tube chassis cars, full cage, the whole bit, with the only exemption being that they're old enough to where they don't have to be emissions tested, and a lot of these cars never had emissions equipment on them to begin with. So again, these are technically street cars, but they're not really street cars. Ain't nobody rolling up to the club in a 6-second car. It don't work like that. You certainly ain't taking nobody to the telly in one of those things either. So there's at least that. But the reality is that is a very specialized class. To get outside of that class, realistically, fast street cars at that point are in the mid-8s. But even then, we're still talking about cars with cages and everything else that comes with that. All the trappings that come with that. Is it still a street car, though? When it is basically a 3-speed automatic or a power glide, and yeah, technically you can drive it. If you got a gear vendor's overdrive, it'll get you to the next drag strip, I guess. But is it really still a street car? I don't know. It's not. Is it too much power? Maybe. But These are different types of cars for different classes of racing that are technically street cars and are street cars only through technicalities. Real talk on this, you can't do that with a Hellcat. You can't do that with a 2020 Mustang. It wouldn't pass the sniffer, literally. These are cars that all never had emissions equipment. I guess the reason why I'm bringing all this stuff up is, does legality have anything to do with any of this? I mean, you can put pulleys on a Hellcat and not take the cats off of it, and it won't necessarily change its emissions profile, provided that you still are running catalytic converters, and there's a lot more stuff that comes with that, but you can kind of get my point here. So fast isn't always fun, and it certainly isn't always safe. But again, the limit that I've seen comes at a cost, and it's usually, and this is another point that I'm wanting to get to, that cost is typically at the cost of the ego of the owners of the car. In some cases, when I've said that the guys got rid of the cars and got something that was like a totally different, still into cars, but something totally more sedate, the thing that they'll tell you first is it quit being fun. But the main thing that they'll tell you is they got scared of driving it. They got scared to death of driving it. But if you notice, they got rid of it. They never detune it, ever. Because that typically, A, costs money, and B, might be a sign of defeat. They'll say, oh, I just moved past it. I don't want that anymore. Real racer, real enthusiast is going to go, dude, it just was too much for the street. Yeah, it was kind of spooky, but it just wasn't any fun anymore. I made it to where it's not going to break as many parts now. It's going to be more manageable. It's going to be more fun. I don't want to feel like I've got to do all this other work to the car just to take the thing out and enjoy it. Like put a cage in it or whatever the case might be. So that's just kind of a bit of an observation. I have never, I don't want to say never. I have seen it once, but that's because the guy sold the car. But I've never seen anybody take a car and unmodify it or demodify it and then take that car to the drag strip. The next time I see it would be the first. And I can tell you this, if the car has the capability to run 920s, you're going to want to run 920s with that thing every time you take it to the drag strip. But what about track prep? See, we haven't even gotten to this part of it yet. I've talked about power to weight, but the reality is that the only time you can ever take advantage of any of that power is on a prepared surface. And again, we're talking about front engine, rear drive combinations, not GTRs or Lambos, not talking about EVs, none of that. We're talking about pony cars, muscle cars here. The only time you can take advantage of the power that these cars put down with anything more than a stock scat pack for this matter, and even that will light the tires up at will on the street, but you put a drag pack on that car and it will dead hood. But the reality is that the only place you can really leg the thing out is going to be at the drag strip on a prepared surface. The issue there is that prepared surface puts an incredible amount of load on the rest of the drivetrain. Again, just look at the pictures from right behind me. That's what a stock boost 93 octane Hellcat with a 309 looks like when it launches. See that right there? You think that's not loading up the suspension? Now start adding power to that. That's when the parts start to break. That's when axles pop. That's when drive shafts pop. That's when rear ends pop. Strip a gear, whatever the case is. But it's also, even with all of those parts being good, that's also without good track prep when the biggest frustration kicks in, and that's when you're spinning. That's when you light the tires up at the launch because track prep isn't any good, or car setup becomes more important. Tire setup, tire pressures become that much more important. The worst thing you can have happen is to have your car at the drag strip and you can't make a pass because it spins for whatever reason. You're overpowering the chassis, tire issues, too much power, whatever the case is. All of that leads a lot of guys to get frustrated with them. And again, I've seen guys get rid of cars specifically for that reason. They simply get frustrated with them. They can't play with them on the street, can't play with them at the drag strip. What's the point of even having the thing anymore? When, if the guy would have just chilled the car out a little bit, everything would have been all right. But again, most guys won't do that because, you know, it's a pride thing. You've invested this time, you've invested this money, whatever the case is. It's just pride. Detune it a little bit, make it a little bit more fun, and you probably will keep the car for a lot longer, if not indefinitely. Walter's saying, excellent points, B. Mason, real world practical tutorial. Yeah, listen, it's just coming from experience, man. I've had a lot of nutty combinations over the years. And I got to tell you, the one that's the most fun, this little girl right there. But thank you, I appreciate it. Kevin's asking, best boost for a cam 6-speed manual Charger 5.7? There is no such thing as best. It just depends on what you want to do with the car. Most will say Pro Charger because it's a little bit less expensive, I think, than a E-Force. You know, the Maggie 2650. 2650 is a great supercharger. Very efficient, makes a ton of power. It just depends on what you're going to be doing with the car. If you want the driving experience of just having a significantly larger engine, get the Maggie, get the E-Force. If you want to take advantage of the cam that you have and drag power even further and further up, RPM could be limited though, based on the cam that you're running. But a centrifugal supercharger would be better for that application. Highway pulls, things like that. Just make sure that you've got the springs and the push rods to carry RPM up around 65, 68, 7,000 RPM. Where a Maggie is going to, in essence, just make the car act like it's got a lot more displacement. Chuck's saying his 345 has given him enough adrenaline rush for now. When I graduate to scared shitless, it'll be a glorious day. Nice. Has happened to me several times. B1's asking, what's your thoughts on putting a manual 6-speed in your Scat Pack? I don't know why you would want to do that. You'd be a whole lot better off just finding a 6-speed Scat Pack and going from there. It'd be a whole lot less of a headache if you decided to go that route. Just trade up for one. I personally would not want to mess with a swap like that. X is saying, what up, Professor B? Got the flex, I like it. Said, I've been using Boostate in my 5.7 for fuel quality control, and I think it had been very helpful. Very cool. I don't have data to prove it, but mile per gallon seems to be much better. I can tell you this. Where is that chart? Just in case you need it, I will, if I can find it. Man, I got folders and paperworks and all kinds of stuff over here. See if I can find that. Oh, here you go. Just in case you need that chart again, bud. There you go. You can go back later and pause it. But, you know, a couple of ounces to a half a tank's usually going to be pretty good. That'll definitely squash any issues you may have with fuel quality. That's been my experience with it, and I've done a bunch of testing with Boostain, and yeah, it works. And I'm stoked for you, man. I'm glad that helped you out. Rick saying, back in Mopar chat having, gonna give Katrina a back to front continuing this year. Looking forward to it. Do you know Mike and his son at OST Dyno? They're going to be getting my Hellcat. I know that Mike's a good guy. He's a trusted name in all of this Hellcat tuning business. So I would say, yeah, I mean, your car is going to be in good hands. He knows his stuff. Rick's saying he wants to take it to the edge of 93 octane. So far as what I can tell, a 285 pulley is about as far as you really want to take it. Some will say a 295, others will say a 310. It just depends on if you're going to be running Boostain, a race gas mix, or something like that. Depends on the elevation that you live at, really, more than anything else. Shiv saying, "What up, Mr. R&D? Got the shades." Oh, my shades are in the truck. The story saying, "Such a great topic. Thank you. I'm glad you're having fun hanging out, my friend." Chuck saying, "I drove my first manual Hellcat wide body, loved it. I still love my RT Shaker, but future goals were in my thoughts at 160 in the kitty." Yeah, and it gets there pretty quickly. The funny thing about Hellcats that, and I've tried to explain this to folks, and it's really hard, but especially for Scat Pack and RT owners that are looking to get into a Hellcat. The one thing that I can tell you about a Hellcat, really for the Scat Pack owners, in a way almost more than the RT guys, is that it is deceptively fast. What you're used to hearing and what you're used to feeling in the Scat Pack is, in terms of G-force, because of the gearing of a Hellcat, you are just going to find yourself going significantly faster. If you're used to cruising at 75 miles an hour and you're just kind of get in the car and you drive, get on the freeway, whatever, instead of 75, you'll be doing 90, and it's going to feel about the same. That's one of the creepy things about the LX platform in general, though. Because it's derived from the W211 and W212 Mercedes platform, it is unimaginably stable, even at obnoxious speeds. And that's both a blessing, and it can get you into trouble just because you can, cruise at such high speeds, and the thing is so stable with its, Autobahn DNA, Autobahn stability DNA working for you there. Chuck saying, "Smash the like." Sovereign saying the same thing. Thank you, guys. Yeah, smash that like button, or smash the like, hit the bell, ring the bell. Destroy Grace. Sovereign Knight 39 who's cracking the throttle. Hell yeah, I like it. Destroyer saying, "Streetcar or strip car, choose wisely." Yeah, and it is an or thing. You can have street and strip, but you've got to know the limitations of not only your skill set, but of your budget and of the time that you want to put into learning that car. Chuck saying, "Yep, I'm street muscle only. Nearest drag strip's 3 hours away." In that case, the funny thing is that, obviously you're not going to see as much or near as much breakage as the strip guys, just mainly because, the tires are really the fusible link in terms of, breakage. Chuck saying, "Use the black key on the street, better hookup." Actually, it's funny. So I do, limit. So for you guys, trivia question, how much boost does the black key limit the Hellcat to? It's actually 5 pounds of boost. The black key, or putting the car in 500 horse mode, I have fun with it. And because it's still really torquey, you just don't get the other half of the boost really on the big end. You'll get this kind of whoosh, and then it'll kind of lay over just a little bit. I have fun with my car in 500 horse mode. And to me, that's one of the endearing things about the Hellcat, is that it's kind of like two cars in one. And that's what makes them fun for me anyway. By the way, if you really want to have fun, put the car in valet mode and drive it. Crypto's saying, "Hey, Cat, what's up, Crypto?" Scott saying, "I asked the other night about a ported throttle body you recommended, Fastman. In the end, what will it do for my 2020 392 Charger? Nothing if you don't have a ported manifold. You'll get a little bit more throttle response, but that's mainly because you've got a larger throttle blade opening per amount of input. Fastman throttle body and a very, very well ported manifold may get you 6 or 8 horsepower across the entire curve. In other words, it'll just lift everything a little bit. And that's not insignificant, by the way. 6 or 8 horsepower across the entire curve is actually a pretty decent gain. But I've seen more, but I've also seen less. So I just try to, shoot for the middle of the target on that. But I can tell you that if you're going to get one of any of the throttle bodies, if you wanted a ported stock throttle body, Fastman's the only way I would go. If you went aftermarket, I would give Dr. Differential and Speed in Groves, Texas a shot and get one of their billet units. Those are really nice. But you're going to the reality is that you would be far better off porting that manifold. Get one of Peak Speed's. I don't really start porting manifolds again for another couple of months. So Peak Speed does a really good job with porting manifolds, and you can start to see some gains with the ported manifold and a larger throttle body. And the explanation of that, I don't have a manifold here to show you, but it's the throat where the opening, like if you're looking through the opening, it comes in, down, and then wraps around from my point of view. And it's as it comes in, it's like a solid, it's a hard drop, comes around, and that's where you have to, it's sculpting horsepower, and you really do have to reshape a lot of that to get everything to work the way that it should to take advantage of the larger throttle body. The reason for that is the cross section, as everything drops, turns, and does everything weird in there, it basically reduces the actual size of the opening. And so, you got an 80 millimeter throttle body, but you might have 77 millimeters worth of actual opening there, for example. Each one, by the way, is a little bit different because it's a 3-piece unit, and it depends on how much casting flash, how much core shift within those 3 pieces. There's a lot that goes on with that manifold. Sovereign's asking, I wonder if anyone's ever done a video with a Hellcat Black Key versus a Scat. Yeah, I did. RP Productions, at my very first track rental that I ever did. I believe there's a video somewhere in my older playlist, quarter miles area, where it's us racing, and he had his Hellcat in 500 horse mode, and I was running the SRT. His car went 1140, and I spun on the launch. We ran again, and I think his car went 1140 something, and I went an 1130 something with my car. That was at full weight. But anyway, yeah, it's a legit fast car, even in with Black Key mode. But yeah, I think he was running a set of 18-inch Bravados with the factory fronts, I think. Anyway, but yeah, no, it's a mid 11-second car in Black Key mode, no doubt about it. Walter's asking, is there a cam that will wake up my factory 2013 RT 6-speed Challenger with a 394? Or is a supercharger the way to go? Which supercharger do you recommend? Man, look, that's literally 2 different ways to go about making power and 2 different budget requirements. Yeah, there are some great cams out there, especially now. We're a lot further into cam development for these cars than we were a while back. But yeah, you got a 392 in the thing. It depends on what you want. So yes, there are some cams that work really well. Do you want a lot of chop, or do you want something a little bit more mild? My Sniper Grind, and these are all sold through Dr. Differential and Speed. My Sniper Grind, power everywhere, not much of a lope to speak of at all. You've got another cam which would work pretty well in a 392. The Joker cam works great in a 5.7. It's again a little bit more of a milder cam in a 392. You got the Warlock, which is going to be a little bit more aggressive. And I adjust parameters on cams, or have adjusted parameters in cams for guys too. Just again, it depends on how aggressive you want to go. Now, with all of that being said, on a dyno jet, most of the cammed 392s will make, and I mean a legit, what the hell is in my face? God dang it. On a dyno jet that's reading the way that it should, most of the cam 392s are going to make anywhere from 475, 480 to 507, 510 for the more aggressive combinations. So again, it just depends on what you want to do. If you want to go a supercharger, like a Pro Charger, for example, Pro Chargers are fun with 6-speed cars just because you can kind of leg the car out a little bit. On a Mustang dyno, oh, by the way, those cam combinations on a Mustang dyno, 470-ish, 480-ish at the most. I've got, let me see if I've got one sitting here. Let's see if Quick Brick's car is in here. I don't think it is. Is it? Maybe it is. Nah, it's all Hellcats. This is all my car here. Well, this is still somewhat relevant. Well, sort of. This is actually more of a very mild cam setup. But anyway, that's kind of what the power curves end up looking like. This is really more to show the difference between two different setups on the dyno. Just how setting the car up differently with two cars that are practically identical can change things around a little bit. But 450-ish to the rear wheels. And again, it depends on how the dyno is reading. Now, if you want to go supercharged, $530, $550-ish is pretty common with Pro Chargers. If you get into the positive displacement superchargers, will be maybe a little bit lower than that, but it'll give you torque basically everywhere. But it's also going to be about double the cost. So, instead of 30 horsepower, you get 100 horsepower to the rear wheels. Instead of at the most 40, 45 horsepower, you get basically double the horsepower, but it is going to cost you about twice as much. Oh, X is saying, I appreciate it. I've been putting about 4 ounces like you recommend last time. Yep, that's the best way to do it. And that's, again, that's what I found in the fuel data logging. You talk about putting you to sleep. But yeah, for the fuel data logging, that's what I found that was the best. 4 ounces, full tank gas, just right. You got about half a tank of gas, couple of ounces, you'll be fine. Eric's saying I have a 2005 single cab Ram that has been Hemi swapped with a 392 from a 2012 SRT8 Challenger. Cool. I agree. Street tires are terrible, even though I have, oh, he's got the traction bars too. Nice. And try 5Rs. Yep. Kevin's asking, is AJ from Hemi Tuners the man or no? He knows his stuff, certainly. I know he tunes a lot of really fast trucks. Oh, Rick's saying he's basically around 1,000 feet above sea level out there. Yeah, you should be good. You'll be real good. Shift is asking, would 410s or 430s be a good setup for an M6 392? Saying, listen up, Direct Connection. 410 isn't going to be enough of a bump outside of the 392s that they come with. So I'd say 430s. If they can get it to work, that'd be a great upgrade. Sovereign's hanging out with Kevin here. But yeah, AJ, yeah, he knows his stuff. Like I say, I've never met him. I've never talked to him in any real length before. BB's asking, odd question. Some debris took off the under engine cover. Does it protect anything vital? It's really more for aero, I think, than anything else. I know quite a few guys that don't even run that thing. So it does protect. In this case, if debris took out your under engine cover, I would be wondering what it would have taken out in terms of your engine. But yeah, no, they're, I at least protected it that time. So I'm saying he's going to try to find that video. Yeah, it's floating around in there somewhere. Oh, Rick's saying he needs to get me his TA 392 intake. Get it to you when I start porting again. Yeah, just hit me up. Oh, Sacred, it looks like he's trying to post that video up in here. It might not let you. Yeah, YouTube will cut the URLs. Oh, Sovereign say it looks like Sovereign say I'll just have to dig for it. Yeah, it's in there. Unfortunately, yeah, it's in there somewhere. They did the Black Key versus the Scat. Yeah, I think he raced Mrs. X's car. But yeah, like I say, the Black Key is actually a lot of fun. It's kind of funny. A lot of folks don't ever get to play with it, and I love it. I'll play with every mode that my car has. Like I say, for me, it's even fun putting it around in valet mode. Plus, in the tuning, I've never done it. I've actually thought about changing some things up, and I can actually change the percentage of power that you get out of the Black Key in valet mode. So anyway, just some fun things that you can do in the tune. But with that, guys, I got to wake up crazy early in the morning, so I got to jump out of here. But I want to thank each and every one of you guys for hanging out with me. Love each one of y'all. Would not do this without you. You said it, don't bend it, keep your shiny side up. Get out there and do something cool for somebody. You know all the outros. But I got to wake up crazy early, so I got to split. Y'all have a great one. We'll catch you on the next one. Adios.